first question to the First Minister is Alan Fred Jones.
Am wnaeth y Prif Weinidog ddatganiad am gynnydd trafodaethau ddiwygio fformula Barnett.
Ni wedi cytuno ar broses gyda Llywodraeth y Daearys Unedig sydd ar nod i fynd ar afel a bygythiad cyd-gyfeirio o ran ein lefelau cyllid perthynol. Fodd bynnag, diwygio Barnett yn llawn yw fan harget hir dymor o hyd.
Diolch yn fawr. Mae Plaid Cymru wedi dadlau dechrau'r cynulliad wrth gwrs bod angen fformula decach i ariannu Cymru ac yn ddiweddar, fel ydych chi newydd dweud, wedi bod yn dadlau'r un peth yn wir yn ei wneud o'n amod cyn derbyn pwerau ar dreth incwm. Nath y blaid lafur ddim byd pan maen nhw mewn llywodraeth tro dwytha. Ydych chi mewn sefyllfa i dweithio ni a fydd llafur os bydd hi'n dod i rym yn San Steffan ar ôl yr etholiad cyffredinol nesaf yn ymrwymo i ddiwygio Barnett yn sylfaenol, neu ydych chi'n cytuno efo Owen Smith nad oes ddim llawer yn byd o'i le ar y fformula?
Na, dwi'n credu na beth yw geiriau Owen Smith. Mae'r mater o gyllido teg yn rhywbeth i ni fel plaid yn dadlau ar hyn o bryd mwyn ddod i sefyllfa yn y manifesto lle fydd yna ffordd ymlaen. Ond wrth gwrs bydd yn help sa'ch chi gallu perswadio eich chwaer blaid yn yr Alban ddim i fod yn erbyn unrhyw fath o newidiadau ynglyn â Barnett.
Paul David.
Diolch Llywydd. Prif Weinidog, mae Jerry Holtham wrth gwrs wedi gwneud un glir yn y gorffennol efallai bydd rhaid addasu fel mae'r Alban yn cael ei cyllido yn gyntaf cyn diwygio'r fformula yn gyfan gwbl. Ydych chi'n derbyn hyn a pa drafodaethau ydych chi wedi cael gyda Alex Salmond ar y mater yma?
Dim un achos barn Alex Salmond yw, dyle yr Alban ddim i fod yn rhan o Barnett beth bynnag achos mae'n cael gweld yr Alban yn annibynnol, so felly dwi'n ddim rhywbeth wedi bod yn awyddus i ddadlau ar hyn o bryd gyda fi na neb arall, ond beth sy'n bwysig yw bod sefyllfa ynglyn â chyllido i bob rhan o Daearys Unedig yn cael i ddatrys unwaith bydd y referendwm wedi mynd trwyddo yn yr Alban a bod y ganlyniad yn yr Alban achos mae'n wir i weid bod fformula Barnett ffili parhau am ragor o flynyddoedd.
Question 2, Russell George.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister make a statement regarding the provision of mental health services in Powys?
Yes, I'm aware that Powys Teaching Health Board works with neighbouring LHBs to deliver high-quality mental health services for its population.
Thank you, First Minister. I do regularly meet with the Montgomeryshire GP cluster group to discuss issues of mutual concern. And a recurring issue which keeps emerging is the poor level of mental health services that patients in North Powys are receiving from BCU Health Board. At the meeting just before Christmas, one GP gave me 2 examples of appalling incidents of out-of-care that had occurred that were very unacceptable. GPs certainly do feel that the patients are still being put at risk and due to the referral and administration's process not working as they see it. Would you be prepared to look at this issue in greater detail and provide these GPs with a reassurance that the government will not tolerate this level of service?
I can inform the member that we're aware of this. The NHS Delivery Unit is undertaking a review which will be completed next month. I'm aware the Health Board has arrangements in place to cover out-of-hours provision and is working to strengthen those arrangements. The review currently undertaken covers a number of areas, including the service pathway, operational working methods and the controls to support effective delivery. And I know that both the Powys Teaching Health Board and Betsy Cadwallader Health Board are working with the delivery unit in order to implement any actions required as the review is progressing.
Simon Thomas.
Diolch Llywydd. Mae nifer yn credu ac wy'n digwydd cytuno nhw Prif Weinidog bod gofal iechyd yn y canolbarth wedi gwanhau escau wad y fallon yn ysbyty Bonglais a bod yna ddim digon o paratoi wedi digwydd i gyfer gofal yn y gymuned yn sgil hynny. Mae adolygiad yn cael ei cynnal hyn o bryd gyda'r Gweinidog o dan gydafyddiaeth Marcus Longley. Dwi newydd cael yr amcanion drafft ar gyfer adolygiad hwnnw. Dwi ddim yn sôn am gofal iechyd y benodol. Dwi'n mynd i sgwennu nôl a gwaed, newch yn siŵr bod gofal iechyd meddwl yn cael ei ystyfiad yn hwn, a newch chi gefnogi yng Nghaesi yn cyd-destun hwnna.
Wel, wrth gwrs, mi'n barod i dderbyn unrhyw cais sy'n dod o'r aelod ac yn ystyried y cais hwnna yn fanwl iawn.
We now move to questions from the party leaders. And first this afternoon is the Leader of Plaid Cymru, Leanne Wood.
Diolch Llywydd. First Minister, education is in the spotlight again today with the latest Estyn report. One area highlighted in that report is the lack of national support to develop leaders in our schools. Do you accept that you failed to provide adequate national leadership?
Well, if you look at the report itself, it's true to say that it is not the sort of report we'd all want to see. And nevertheless, it is true to say that there are parts of the report that we can take some heart from. For example, the reports Anne Keane, talking to BBC Wales, said that she would hope that because of the introduction of several Welsh Government initiatives that there will be a trend of improvement in the future. We've seen that more accountability has been introduced, and of course she welcomed the literacy and numeracy framework. What I think has not been there, as it should have been, is accountability. That accountability has been strengthened, and for example, the school improvement plans will help that.
First Minister, it's been over a month now since the publication of the PISA results, and I'm sure that you've taken time to reflect. You were on record acknowledging that you've taken your eye off the ball. As you seem reluctant to accept that there's been a lack of national leadership, can you tell me if you can put your finger on exactly what has gone wrong in education in this country?
A fair question. I think the answer is that there's been a blurring of the lines of accountability in terms of leadership in schools, in terms of leadership in local education authorities, and we as a government, of course, have to accept that it's important that there's a clear way forward in the future, and I believe there is. If you look at what was announced by the previous Education Minister and by the current Education Minister, you will see that there's a clear way forward in terms of schools in Wales in order to see the improvements that we would all want to see. And this is being evidenced, for example, by the closing of the gap between Wales and England with regard to GCSEs, a gap which I expect it to close further in the future.
You appear not to take any responsibility, First Minister, for the failings in the education system to date. You'll be aware, I'm sure, of the scathing comments from the Labour MP for Is-deitlau yesterday, who said that he's frustrated that the Welsh Government is not addressing real bread and butter issues like education, which are concerning people day to day. Given these internal difficulties for you, First Minister, are you coming round to the view that a reduction in the number of Welsh MPs might not be a bad idea after all?
I think the two things are unrelated. I mean, I did make it quite clear. I know she doesn't always listen to my answers, but I did make it very clear that we as a government do take some responsibility. Of course we do, and I said that in answer to her second question, which she seemed not to have heard. But nevertheless, it's important that responsibility is taken by local education authorities and indeed by teachers themselves, who at the end of the day are the ones delivering the service. This has to be a joint venture, as it were. In terms of what is said outside of this chamber, we are very much focused, of course, on education. That will continue, which is why we made the pledge to seek to protect school spending, as we have done. It's why, of course, we have invested over the last decade in more than 140 new schools or improvements to schools. Now, I was in school in the 1980s, and in the 1980s, the government of the day couldn't even build a shed.
We now move to Leader of the Opposition, Andrew R.T. Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, I'm sure you will want to welcome the excellent news that announced the growth figures for the United Kingdom today, the employment figures that were announced last week as well, that showed in the last 3 months of last year 280,000 jobs were made across the United Kingdom, of which 220,000 were full-time and 60,000 were part-time. We've spent the last 2.5 years of yourself and your Labour colleagues prophesying a double dip, a triple dip, and the economic policy has been wrong of the UK government. I'm sure today you'd like to use your opportunity at First Minister's question to congratulate the Chancellor on such a record of economic stability and economic recovery.
Well, of course I welcome the figures. Who couldn't? But we're just back where we were some 3 or 4 years ago, so I don't think it's a question yet of saying that this is a wonderful step forward that will be sustained. Though, of course, I welcome the figures. I'm sure he will be more than happy then to congratulate the Welsh Government on the fact the Welsh economy has done better than the UK average as a direct result of what we have done here in Wales.
Well, First Minister, it's always the same, isn't it? You want to detract from the really good news that is happening in the overall economy, but sadly, Wales is lagging the rest of the UK in its economic performance. But let's look at what is in your competence and what you are charged with delivering. As we've heard earlier about the Estyn report today, and it is a shame that the Education Minister isn't with us today to hear members' comments, because it is a damning indictment on 14 years of Labour failure in education. What we have is the number of secondary schools who've gone into the unsatisfactory category going up from 14% to 23%. The number of excellent schools remain in a small minority. And 2/3 of secondary schools and half of primary schools are in need of follow-up inspections. Now, you started your term in the 4th Assembly as being a government about delivery. Will you join your Education Minister in apologising for Labour's lack of delivery in education that is amplified by this report today from Estyn?
Well, let's talk about the economy, shall we? Unemployment, UK average. If we look at youth unemployment for those between 18 and 24, well below the UK average. If we look at the construction industry, well above the UK average. If we look at the number of people in work in Wales, a historic high. If we look at the level of economic inactivity, much lower, dropped at a faster rate than the rest of the UK. So we're not, this idea that we're at the bottom of everything is quite simply factually wrong. The reality is that our unemployment rate is not the highest in Britain. In fact, it has come down faster than anywhere else. The success of Jobs Growth Wales illustrates how well we've done in terms of youth unemployment. So, running the story that somehow Wales is doing badly is clearly wrong. Nearly a 200% increase in foreign direct investment in the course of 1 year. All these things are conveniently forgotten. Let's talk about education.
At last.
Yes, there are, of course, issues that need to be resolved as part of this report. We recognise that. But his position would be stronger, I believe, if it wasn't for the fact that he wants to cut education spending by 12.5%. His position would be stronger in terms of accountability if he didn't want to make every school in Wales a free school. His position would be better if he didn't want to create a situation where schools had to commission their own transport, commission their own school meals, commission their own special services, to commission their own HR department, no doubt, to pay teachers, and to have no accountability at all, either to their local communities or indeed to any elected bodies. His position would be stronger. And we look, of course, at what happens across the border in England, where we have endless meddling. Serial meddler in charge of education, and what appears to be a department that's keen to brief against its own inspectorate. So I think the situation is that, yes, we have much to do in Wales, that much is true, but we take no lessons from his party in England.
Well, I hope on Saturday the Welsh team are as good at dodging the bullet and getting over the try line as you are at avoiding questions, First Minister. If you want to look at England and what the education minister's done in England, he has lifted 250,000 pupils out of poor performing education schools, and above all, he's lifted them to get better grades in the English education system. But the point that I made to you was about the Estyn inspection report that was about your education system and the education system that your government is responsible for running here in Wales. And the damning indictment in this report and the previous report that came out last year was the lack of leadership and direction that was offered to the Welsh education system. I think it's a crying shame that you weren't prepared to apologise for the mistakes that were made and map out a bright future for Welsh education. And the people who are watching this session today will have seen the emptiness that you are offering Welsh education, First Minister.
I can promise the Leader of the Opposition that I don't expect to see any bullets fired on Saturday on the pitch. He is the master of the mixed metaphor, as we know. Last week was a prime example of that, but nevertheless, he's done it again. The Estyn report illustrates there are areas where there need to be improvement, but it also illustrates areas where that improvement is coming. He mentions England. How many schools have been built in England? The first thing that the government did there was to stop the school building programme. First thing they did. When I was in school in the 1980s, as someone who actually went to a comprehensive school and whose children were in a comprehensive school, I can say that nothing was invested in schools in Wales in the 80s. Absolutely nothing. I sat in classrooms with broken windows. I sat in classrooms with ivy growing up the inside of the wall. Because the government that ran the country and his party at that time spent absolutely no money at all. Why? Because they didn't have children in the comprehensive system. That's the reason for it. Yes, we will learn the lessons from this report. That much is true. But we are not at least in a situation where money has been diverted away from building new schools in order to pay for the free schools policy. That's what's happened in England. That's where the money went. Money taken away from the most needy to pay for the few. That's what they did. If you look at the situation in England, we also see a situation where we have the Inspectorate and the Department at war with each other. That's what we see in England. And, of course, the Secretary of State, who cannot help but meddle on a weekly basis in the curriculum. Accountability is important. We will move forward in Wales as we see the shambles being generated in England.
And finally, Leader of the Welsh Liberal Democrats, Kirsty Williams.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. First Minister, in 2011, following that year's disappointing Estyn annual report, you told us we would have to wait for your Education Minister's speech to find out the solutions to the Welsh education problem. In 2012, following another disappointing Estyn report, you said, next year I expect to see improvement. But actually, in 2013's Estyn annual report, the proportion of schools awarded good or excellent judgments was even lower than the previous year. And today, in our report today, Estyn report that the number of secondary schools rated as unsatisfactory has almost doubled. First Minister, after 4 years of asking you, following the publication of disappointing Estyn annual reports, could you give me a straight answer today? When will we see, and when will Welsh pupils see, the improvements your government continually promise but don't deliver?
Well, I would argue that those improvements are already showing signs of being identified, although not enough as yet. Firstly, the number of schools that have been built. I've been to a number of schools in the past 4 years that are brand new comprehensives, which were never built for many, many years in the 80s and 90s in Wales. Never built. So I've seen that. I have seen good examples in schools in Wales of schools that are doing very well. What is lacking is consistency. There's no question about that. And so what we will look to be doing as part of the school improvement plan is making sure that heads are supported where there's a question over leadership, where departments in schools are supported by bringing in teachers from good performing schools in order to turn those departments around. And that, I believe, is the way to see improvement in the future. We are beginning to see signs of that improvement, and I illustrate the example, of course, that I gave earlier on, namely that the gap that is there in GCSE attainment with England is narrowing.
First Minister, I don't know which bit of the doubling of unsatisfactory schools doesn't alarm you. You and your education ministers, both past and present, continually tell us that the key policy to drive up standards is through the creation of the regional consortia. Yet, if you read the Estyn report today, they say that in more than half of the local authorities that have been inspected, that regional consortia are failing to deliver an improvement of standards. You've placed everything on the creation of those consortia. When will that approach start to benefit all Welsh pupils?
Well, this is tied in with the latest debate on the Williams Commission and the stance that her party will take with regard to the Williams Commission. The Williams Commission has made very strong recommendations in terms of what the future should be in terms of public service delivery in Wales. And I look forward to hearing what she says about that and indeed about education as part of that debate, which she has not done so far. Nevertheless, I reiterate the point that I made earlier, that we are seeing signs of improvement. It is far from the case that that improvement is satisfactory as yet. And where there are schools that are rated as unsatisfactory, they will receive assistance to make sure that they are turned around. And the Education Minister will be making an announcement in the very near future in terms of a plan on how to do that.
So I'm not quite sure if the First Minister understands what the regional consortia are. They are the gathering together of those local authorities to overcome the disadvantages of having small education authorities, and it's not working. I'm not saying that. The inspector is saying it. The approach you're taking is not to delivering the improvements that you promised. Now, last week, I asked you about your decision to ditch the health targets that were contained in your programme for government. But let's have a look at the education targets in your programme for government. Actually, attendance in primary and secondary schools is down on last year. The percentage of secondary schools inspected graded as good or excellent has flatlined at 45% when you said they would improve. And there are no excellent standards in further education, adult or community learning, nor in local authorities. Now that it is clear that you're not meeting your education targets, do you intend to ditch those too?
No, I never said that we would. But what is clear is that there is a need to examine the way in which education is delivered, which she seems to indicate herself, which is why I look forward to seeing what she has to say later on this afternoon. Because at the end of the day, it's not the Welsh Government that delivers. It sets the framework and it provides funding, that's true. The delivery is done by local education authorities and by schools and teachers. And so, in terms of ensuring better delivery in the future, it's important that teachers are part of that delivery, of course. It's important that local education authorities are part of that delivery, or in the case of the Conservatives, not part of it at all. The schools doing it all themselves. And then we can see the improvement that we have begun to see, an improvement that is far from what we would want to see as yet, that much is true, but to see that improvement continue in the future.
We now move back to questions on the paper, and it's question 3, William Powell.
Diolch yn fawr, Llawydd. Will the First Minister please make a statement on the duty of local health boards to communicate with the public?
Well, all NHS organisations in Wales have a duty to communicate and engage effectively with the public.
I'd like to thank the First Minister very much for that response. Just this lunchtime, together with Petitions Committee colleagues, I received a petition of some 11,000 signatures from Cardigan Hospital, and the petitioners raised with me severe concerns regarding the quality and the transparency of communications that they have with the Hywel Dda Health Board. In addition to that, I've also heard that there are significant problems with the communication between the Health Board and Aberystwyth University, notably around mental health issues. First Minister, do you agree with me that it's necessary for Hywel Dda Health Board to raise its game in these matters and to communicate effectively with the public that it serves?
Well, I can say to the member that the Minister has made clear that he expects to see more positive engagement and communication by the Health Board with the local population, and he has asked the Welsh NHS Confederation to assist the Health Board in helping it to rebuild its relationship with local communities. So we are aware of the issue, and that work will be ongoing in order to rebuild the trust that should exist between the Board and the community that it serves.
Darren Miller.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, it's not just the Hywel Dda University Health Board that's had problems with communicating with the public. The same has also been the case in North Wales, where the Betsy Cadwaladr University Health Board, of course, announced a temporary suspension of elective non-urgent surgery last week, didn't communicate that effectively to individual patients within a reasonable timescale. Can you tell us whether your government will be issuing guidance to local health boards to improve the way in which they are able to communicate with patients where operations might have to be postponed or cancelled, sometimes for very necessary reasons?
It can be, of course, a matter of notice. It's difficult to let people know sometimes in good time when things have to be changed at short notice, although, of course, the situation now has been reversed. I will ask the Health Minister to write to you formally on this in terms of what guidance is already available.
Ellen Jones.
Wel, mae'n amlwg nag yw Bwrdd Iechyd Hywel Dda wedi gwrando ar yr hyn oedd gan yr Gweinidog Iechyd i ddweud wrthyn nhw ynglyn â gwella cyfathrebu, achos fe nath 11,000 o bobl lofnodi deiseb yn erbyn cael gwelyau yn Aberteifi, a llond bysedd o bobl Aberteifi wedi dod yma i gyflwyno'r deiseb yma heddi. Fe wnaeth Bwrdd Iechyd Hywel Dda gyhoeddi cael holl welyau ysbyty Aberteifi heb unrhyw fath o ymgynghori gyda'r gymuned, fod hi'n ofynnol iddyn nhw wneud hynny o dan cynllawiau Llywodraeth Cymru. A wnewch chi ymchwilio i'r ffaith fod Bwrdd Iechyd Hywel Dda wedi dewis peidio ymgynghori gyda'r gymuned leol pan yn gwneud newid mor arwyddocaol a thynnu pob gwely o'r ysbyty.
Wrth gwrs, y Gweinidog yn sgwennu ynglyn â hwnna, ond jyst i ddweud, wrth gwrs, mae'r Bwrdd Iechyd wedi dweud bydd yna ddim gwelyau yn cael ei golli i'r sir. Mae'n bwysig i bwysleisio hwnna. A hefyd, wrth gwrs, fel wedys i yn gynharach, mae yna waith yn cael ei wneud ar hyn o bryd mwyn sicrhau bod y Bwrdd Iechyd yn gwella y cyfathrebu sydd wedi digwydd lan i nawr.
Question 4, Bethan Jenkins.
A wnaeth y Prif Weinidog datganiad ar asbestos mewn ysgolion yng Nghymru?
Llywydd, dwi'n deall bod chi wedi rhoi caniatâd i gwestiynau 4 a 10 cael ei grwpio. Felly rwy'n cydnabod natur ddifrifol asbestos mewn ysgolion, yn enwedig o ran diogelwch, disgyblion wrth gwrs, ac athrawon. Mae'r awdurdod gweithredol iechyd a diogelwch yn rheoleuddio'r sefyllfa ac yn monitro cydymffurfiaeth. O dan y drefen reoleiddio, mae'n ofynnol I awdurdodau lleol gynnal arolygon asbestos mewn ysgolion a gweithredu system rheoli asbestos.
Diolch am eich ateb, Prif Weinidog. Dwi wedi gweld nifer o gyfathrebiaeth sydd yn dangos bod yna diffyg eglurdeb ymwneud â pwy sydd yn gyfrifol am rheolaeth asbestos mewn ysgolion yng Nghymru. Mae David Laws ar lefel San Steffan yn dweud mae Llywodraeth Cymru sydd yn gyfrifol ac mae Llywodraeth Cymru yn dweud mae Llywodraeth San Steffan sydd yn gyfrifol. A fedrwch chi roi mwy o wybodaeth i ni heddiw ynglyn â phwy sydd yn gyfrifol mwyn I ni ddod i'r afael y sefyllfa difrifol iawn yma mewn ysgolion yng Nghymru.
Mae'r cyfrifoldeb gyda'r awdurdod gweithredol iechyd a diogelwch, mae hwnna'n hollol clir, ynglyn â sicrhau bod pethau yn digwydd fel delen nhw. Mae hwnna'n gyfrifoldeb o'r awdurdod hwnna a hefyd swyddogion iechyd amgylcheddol awdurdodau lleol. A wrth gwrs mae yna peth cyfrifoldeb ynglyn ag ysgolion ynglyn â os ma eisiau cael gwared asbestos bod hwn yn cael I wneud yn iawn ac yn saff. Fydd na canllawiaeth yn cael ei gyhoeddi cyn bo hir sydd yn cynnwys manylion o beth yw cyfrifoldebau rhywna sydd ar gwahanol dyletswyddau ynglyn â rheoli a cael gwared o asbestos yn ynglyn â'r cyfrifoldeb gyda'r awdurdod diogelwch mae'r cyfrifoldeb a wedyn wrth gwrs sicrhau bod y cyfrifoldebau yn cael ei symud ymlaen gyda hwnna'n gyfrifoldeb hefyd i'r swyddogion iechyd amgylcheddol.
Aled Roberts.
Diolch Llywydd. Prif Weinidog, mae'r gwrthdaro yma rhwng iechyd a diogelwch a'r rheolaeth o fewn ysgolion wedi bod yn mynd ymlaen rwan am nifer o fisoedd. Mae yna ganllawiau newydd yn Lloegr ar fi'n cael ei cyhoeddi yn dilyn adroddiad gan Pwyllgor ar Gancr yn San Steffan. Ydych chi'n gwybod pryd fydd Adran Addysg Cymru yn cyhoeddi canllawiau newydd wrth ystyried bod rhai awdurdodau lleol ddim wedi cynnal yr arolygon yma ydych chi wedi sôn am ryw 10 mlynedd?
Wel, fe wedi mae'r canllawiaeth hynny mynd I gael ei gyhoeddi yn fuan a wedi gwneud yn glir ynglyn â pwy sy'n gyfrifol ynglyn â sicrhau bod diogelwch yn yr ysgolion ynglyn â system o arolygu a hefyd wrth gwrs y system o gyfrifoldebau.
Nick Ramsey.
Diolch. First Minister, we've come a long way since the realisation that asbestos is responsible for a number of very horrible illnesses, including asbestosis and mesothelioma. We've also moved on now from the idea that it's completely safe to leave asbestos in situ, particularly in public buildings such as schools. Aled Roberts mentioned the committee in England, in the wake of which now the Education Department has decided that it is unsafe and unsustainable to leave asbestos in buildings such as schools. I've heard what you've had to say, and I think to a lot of people out there it would very much sound like passing the buck. I don't really care whose responsibility this is, but I think you as First Minister and your Health Minister and your Education Minister have a duty to really make sure that we make our schools as safe as they possibly can be. That isn't happening at the moment. Please, please give us and parents out there a timeline by the end of which schools will be, you can assure that people at schools are completely safe.
Yeah. Well, we can give an assurance now that schools are safe because we know that asbestos is safe if it is undisturbed. So simply removing the asbestos with the enormous cost that comes with that would not make financial sense. But rather than just the financial sense, there's another issue here. It is often safer to leave undamaged asbestos in situ,
it's not
subject to a regular assessment, rather than creating additional fibre or dust disturbance to its removal.
That's the old
that
evidence.
Has been the reality for many
evidence.
years. And that is not my understanding, in the situation he has described is not my understanding in terms of the guidance that is coming from the Health and Safety Executive.
Mohammed Asghar.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. First Minister, I welcome the news that the Kumkan High School recently reopened its door to people after work to remove asbestos. However, I am concerned that although the school closed in October 2012, but the work to remove the asbestos did not commence until June 2013. Does the Minister agree with me that the work to remove asbestos when discovered in schools should commence without delay to minimize the disruption to those people, parents and staff affected? And could he kindly tell the Chamber what was the reason for this long delay?
Well, it's not our doing, of course, sir. This is not a matter for the Welsh Government. That's a matter for the authorities on the ground. I don't know why it took that long to begin work. There may have been good reasons for it in terms of making sure the conditions were safe for workers to go in to remove the asbestos. We are not aware of it, but it's not the Welsh Government's role to ensure that this work is done. It's the role of those authorities on the ground. Cwmcarn, of course, originally was a GMS school.
Question 5, Susie Davis.
Will the First Minister provide an update on the review of the individual patient funding request process, please?
Well, the preliminary work on the review is nearly finished. Officials have met with all the local panels and will meet with patient groups tomorrow. The feedback from these meetings will inform the review group's work when they meet on the 31st of January.
Well, thank you for that, First Minister. With so many reviews of so many aspects of the health service currently underway, I didn't really want this one to get lost. Now, we brought evidence before you, of course, that women with certain breast cancers are likely to be losing out as a result of the existing review. But if you remain politically motivated to resist a cancer treatment fund, can you tell us exactly when we might actually get a full timetable from you, rather than just the preliminary announcement you've made today?
Well, I've given the timetable. The group will report by the end of March 2014. It's for the Minister then to make a decision. But yes, what we don't want, of course, is a cancer drugs fund that prevents people from getting funding. Which is what, of course, is happening in England. We know that the IPFR system is far better at reviewing requests such as this successfully. The Cancer Drugs Fund in England turns down the vast majority of the requests that it gets. So no, we don't. It's not politically motivated. We don't want to disadvantage people in Wales, as I'm afraid the Tories have done to people in England.
Diolch, Llywydd. Well, First Minister, this may be a question that people don't want to ask, but I think it's important. Where patients are not judged to be eligible for life-saving treatments on the NHS, what efforts can the Welsh Government make to deter doctors from charging patients privately for extremely expensive treatments that often do little more than raise false hopes for recovery or an extended lifespan?
There are issues there of professional ethics, there's no doubt about that. You'll have heard, of course, the Health Minister in the last week or two talk about the need to eliminate treatment that sometimes serves no purpose or sometimes makes things worse. And that, I think, is an absolutely correct message to give. Any competent surgeon or doctor should be ensuring that treatment is available on the NHS. No competent or honest doctor should divert patients to private treatment that is not required.
Peter Black.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, in addition to the very important issues raised by Susie Davis and Lindsay Whittle, I've had experience through my constituents who have applied for drugs in this particular way, have been turned down. But because the health board do not directly inform the patient, but actually go to the consultant, and sometimes the consultant does not pass on that message to the patient, by the time the patient finds out they've been turned down, the period by which they can appeal that decision has been passed. Could I ask, when you're reviewing the current situation, that you have a look at this to make sure that patients are aware of decisions in a timely manner and are able to put an appeal in within the prescribed period?
Well, consultants should be doing that. And one thing I should emphasise is there is a duty on consultants to make sure the applications that are made properly and fully by the consultants. A letter is not good enough. And I know of circumstances where a simple letter has been sent without any supporting information. That isn't helping patients. It's important that consultants get this right as well. Nevertheless, where circumstances change, my understanding is that people are able to reapply in any event, and it certainly wouldn't be right, of course, for people to lose the ability to go through the system as they should because the information has not been passed on to them by their own doctors. That is a duty, I think, that rests on the shoulders of consultants who made the application in the first place.
Question 6, Janet Finn-Saunders.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister make a statement on orthopaedic services in North Wales?
Yes, with £13.5 million of additional funding provided by us, there has been a great improvement over the past 3 years.
First Minister, what you failed to mention is the fact that many of the specialist and complex services provided by Gabowen Hospital have now been repatriated back to consultants within North Wales. And it's fair to say that concerns have been raised with me by GPs because what's happening now, there's a triage, three-phase system that a patient struggling with a complex revision or a specialist orthopaedic need for treatment actually then waits several months to go to a consultant who can't actually carry out that treatment. They're then back to square one as they're then referred by the consultant to Gabowen. First Minister, my constituents have asked me to ask you, what steps are you taking to ensure that those patients in North Wales who do require the more complex and specialist orthopaedic treatment that is only available at Gabowen Hospital, that can access these specialised services quickly, without unnecessary, costly and bureaucratic delays?
Well, the situation that the members described, on the face of it, seems senseless, of course. No one could defend it. If she could provide me with further details, I'll be more than happy to investigate the situation.
Griffiths?
Prif Weinidog, ydych chi'n hyderus na fydd Bwrdd Iechyd Betsy Cadwaladr yn gorfod atal llawdriniaethau eto eleni fel y gwnaethon nhw wrth gwrs wrthos diwetha, a bod ganddyn nhw'r capacity angenrheidiol i ddelio gyda phwysau'r geia pan fydd y geiaf yn dod?
Wy'n hyderus bod nhw wedi delio gyda pwysau'r geia, wy'n hyderus iawn bydd nhw gallu delio gyda damweiniau. Weithiau, wrth gwrs, mae yna siwr gymaint o ofyn ar wasanaethau. Mae rhaid felly i ohirio rai o peth llawdriniaeth am amser byr, ond fi bach nawr i weld bod pethau wedi symud yn ôl i'r trefen cyn hynny. Ond pwysig dros ben bod gyda nhw cynlluniau i ddelio gyda damweiniau yn gwmws na beth nath nhw.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, will you outline the Welsh Government's position on UK membership of the European Union?
Well, the UK's membership of the EU is essential to the prosperity of both the UK and Wales. We know that Wales benefits in many fundamental ways, including through programmes such as the structural funds and the common agricultural policy, without which our farmers could not function or operate. And our trade and foreign investment prospects are enhanced by our membership through unfettered access to the single market.
Thank you. A recent study has shown that more than 120,000 jobs in Wales, and 4,000 of these are in my Delyn constituency, are dependent on the EU. And the Chief Executive Airbus, which employs 6,000 people in Flintshire, has said Europe is key to its continued success. Will you further press the Conservative-led Westminster Government to listen to industry leaders like Airbus in the hope they will stop behaving like UKIP +1, a policy which will put jobs in Wales at risk?
Well, the approach that we take to the UK's membership of the EU is not one of blinkered nationalism, which I'm afraid exists as mentioned opposite, not everyone in fairness, but certainly with regard to UKIP as well. The reality is the Welsh economy would not function properly without membership of the EU. Why? Because there are so many companies here, Airbus is one, who are only in Wales because Wales is, through its membership of the UK, a member of the EU. It wouldn't be here otherwise. Why on earth would they bother coming to the UK when they could relocate or locate their factories within the much larger European market, which is far larger than the UK on its own? I've never understood this argument that somehow Wales or Britain would be better off outside the EU. Reducing your ability to access one of the world's largest markets for a country with a proud history of trading seems to me to be utterly insane.
Andrea Sandbach.
Well, the Chief Executive of Airbus has clarified his comments and made it very clear that jobs in the UK are not dependent on Britain's membership of the EU, and I'm very happy to pass that on to the First Minister should he require that clarification, and indeed to my colleague Sandy Mewis. First Minister, isn't it right that the people of Wales should be given their opportunity to vote and have their say on the membership of the European Union, where constituents from across Wales can express their views and decide whether or not they wish to be members of the European Union or not? And they are perfectly able to assess, make their own assessments as to the benefits of Wales's membership of the European Union.
I do wonder sometimes whether the members in the right party. But if people wish to have a referendum, of course, on Britain's membership of the European Union, they can vote for UKIP. That's the whole point. If people wish to have a referendum on Wales's membership of the UK, they can vote for Plaid Cymru. That's, at the end of the day, that's what Plaid Cymru stand for. The country's a democracy, and if that's what people wish, they can do so. But the reality is this. Britain on its own is simply not big enough to attract investment. It is absolutely dependent on its membership of the EU. Our farmers would go bust without access to the European market. They would go bust. There's no question about that. They would not be able to compete in the face of tariffs that would be erected against them by what would then be the European Union. They would still have to abide by European rules. still have to abide by European rules. You end up like Norway, where you have no control over the regulations that are created in Europe, but you still have to abide by them if you want to sell into the European market. The reality is the party opposite is driven by a narrow-minded, blinkered nationalism. That's all it is. Their concern is what is good for London, not what's good for Wales.
Roger Thomas.
Prif Weinidog, dwi'n croesawu'n fawr iawn eich sylwadau chi ynglyn â'r manteision i Gymru o fod o fewn yr Undeb Ewropeaidd, ac yn wir, y manteision i'r Deyrnas Unedig i fod yn aelod wladwriaeth o'r Undeb Ewropeaidd. Ond beth ych chi'n mynd i wneud i sicrhau fod pobl Cymru yn ymwybodol o'r manteision hynny? Oherwydd pe bai referendwm, wrth gwrs, yma yna bosibilrwydd y bydde dinasyddion y Deyrnas Unedig yn pleidleisio i dynnu allan o'r Undeb Ewropeaidd, ac fe fydde oblygiadau hynny yn enfawr i Gymru fel eich chi wedi amlinellu. Beth ych chi fel Llywodraeth yng Nghymru yn mynd i wneud i sicrhau fod pobl Cymru yn ymwybodol o'r manteision amlwg o fod o fewn yr Undeb Ewropeaidd?
Wel, fi wedi bod yn uchel fy ngloch ynglyn â sicrhau bod bobl yn deall hynny. Wy'n credu bydd y ddadl yn diddorol dros y blynydde nesaf. Beth sy'n glir yw, jyst un peth, bydd yr aelod yn gwybod hwn wrth gwrs. 1.9 biliwn o bunnoedd sydd wedi dod o Ewrop trwy'r cronfeydd strwythurol. Bydd yr arian ddim ar gael i Gymru heb y cronfeydd hynny, a dwi ddim yn credu am 1 muned bydd yr arian yn dod yn gyredig o'r ganghellor yn Llundain. Bydd fe jyst yn cadw yr arian iddi hunan. Heb aelodaeth yr Undeb Ewropeaidd, does na ddim ddyfodol i ffermo yng Nghymru hefyd o achos y taliadau CAP, a hefyd wrth gwrs y ffaith bod gan ffermwyr yng Nghymru y modd i fi mewn i'r farchnad fawr, sef y farchnad Ewropeaidd. Dwi'n ddim i ddweud bod popeth yn berffaith yn i'r Comisiwn, a popeth yn berffaith yn i'r strwythur. Sneb yn dweud hynny. Ond i fi, mae tynnu mas o un o'r marchnadoedd mwyaf yn y byd yn rhywbeth ffôl dros ben.
Question 8, Julie Morgan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. What is the Welsh Government doing to increase the presence of international organisations in Wales?
We continue our efforts to increase the presence of international organisations in Wales, including increased inward investment from international companies.
I thank the First Minister for that reply. Would the First Minister be able to provide an update on the joint bid with Cardiff Council to host the International Cricket Council in Cardiff?
Well, we understand that Cardiff is on the shortlist of 4. The project would be expected to create 70 jobs. We don't know yet when a decision will be made on the bids, but we have worked with Glamorgan and indeed with the City Council and have supported the joint bid to the ICC.
Susie Davis.
Well, Llywydd, First Minister, the presence of international organisations, particularly international businesses, is very welcome in Wales. While we're happy to see 67 firms coming to Wales this year, that's still only 4% of the inward investment for the whole of the UK, and considerably less than the 15% that Wales enjoyed when Labour took on a devolved government at the beginning of devolution. As Welsh Government has now considered aftercare strategy to turn these green routes into permanent routes, will your government be adopting the Welsh Conservatives' ideas set out in our Destination Cymru document, which I'm sure you've had an opportunity to see?
We spend a lot of time selling Wales abroad and at home, getting investment into Wales, as the figures show, bringing jobs into Wales. What the Tories want to do is set up a council. That is their answer to all this. In terms of aftercare, does she not know of the anchor companies? Does she not know that? That's been person too. Clearly not. Otherwise, they're just trying to take one of our ideas. And to hark back to the days when Wales took 15% of investment, there was a reason for that. The WDA sold Wales on the basis, come to Wales because people will accept less money than anywhere else. That's where the jobs came. And guess what? They all went. When all those companies went somewhere else where it was even cheaper. So let's not pretend that it took some effort to do that. At the end of the day, it was simply a question of come and employ these people because they're willing to work on the cheap. Well, I'm not prepared for people in Wales to work on the cheap as the Tories wanted them to do in the 80s and 90s, and they destroyed our coal and steel industries, which is what they did. We are looking at good quality jobs for the people of Wales, jobs that rely on skills, jobs that are sustainable in the future, not jobs that are here today, gone tomorrow, which is exactly what the Tories created.
Jocelyn Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, I'm sure you do agree that maintaining links with other governments is also important, especially in terms of trade and the wider economic cooperation at that international level. Sadly, we've seen in recent years anyway a decline here in the presence of other governments, especially consuls. Have you had any discussions on reversing this trend, and what are you doing to encourage the presence of other governments here?
I've had many discussions on reversing this trend. I've spoken to a number of ambassadors. We have more honorary consuls than ever before, but I'd like to see more, well, I'd like to see full-time consuls return to Wales. The Irish consulate, of course, was closed for financial reasons at that time. We will continue to make representations to foreign governments to open a consulate in Cardiff. One of the problems is that there is a reciprocal agreement between different governments that limit the number of consulates that can be opened in any one country. So, for example, if we wish to have a Chinese consulate in Wales, there has to be agreement for an extra British consulate in China, and that sometimes limits the scope that we have. But yeah, certainly we want to see the establishment of a number of full-time consulates in Wales in the future, and I've had a number of discussions, ongoing discussions with various governments with regard to establishing them.
Thank you, First Minister.